Hi, thanks for joining me. So this video is just a short video to help other autistic individuals. I'm autistic myself. I've had a very late diagnosis just a few years ago as an adult. And this video is focusing on learning to put your well-being first. So I struggled with this for many years. It was more extreme for me because for decades I was walking around with autism unaware I had it. So just in a nutshell, autism makes the individual vulnerable. That's one thing. However, an individual walking around with autism completely unaware that they've got the autism is worse. That individual is a lot more vulnerable, and I've experienced that myself. So when I got diagnosed with autism, I still didn't know what autism really was, so I started doing some research, and I was suffering with a lot of anxiety at the time, so I knew that I needed to do my research, but sometimes my mind wouldn't let me, if that makes sense. It would slip my mind, and then I'd remember, oh yeah, I need to do my research. So over time I did do a lot of research on autism, and what kept coming up, amongst many other things, was I'm not criticizing non-autistic people, because everybody is different. You know, there are honest people out there and dishonest people out there. So just putting that to one side, having said that, what kept coming up was autistic individuals tend to be loyal. They're not really interested in gossip. If an autistic individual is an adult working in an office, they're not going to be interested in office politics and gossip, that kind of thing. The mind works differently, I suppose. So they're loyal. That's what kept coming up as a trait of autism. Very loyal. And they tend to do as they're told and follow instructions. Now that's good. But if there's someone on the outside of the autistic person wanting to take advantage, then that's obviously really bad, isn't it? So that loyalty and doing as they're told and following instructions can easily be taken advantage of. And I just want to get it out there that it comes down to the word no. It comes down to the word no. It's very simple. And I struggled to say no to people when people were asking me to do something for them. And it could have been bad for my well-being, and I either knew that or I didn't. But because I was autistic and didn't know that I was walking around with the ASD, I was obviously more vulnerable. So I think I was more of a target. And I didn't know back then that I actually had the right to say no. So when you think of it that way, it's quite scary, really. Doing a lot of talking, so I've got my Earl Grey tea with me. So I think just to touch on a few of the, I suppose, signs or symptoms that the autistic individual isn't putting their well-being first. And that phrase, not putting your well-being first, is pretty much the same as the trait that I kept reading, which was struggling to stand up for yourself, struggling to defend yourself. So I think some of the signs that the autistic individual hasn't learned to put their well-being first would be increased anxiety. I think fearing people, being scared of people, feeling restless when they're on their own, possibly a build-up of anger, struggling to sleep, increased frustration, maybe some stomach problems, not being able to eat, worrying more and more. I think it all really chimes with struggling to put your well-being first. And I think it's a question of just knowing in your mind that you can say no. Now, I've learned this over the last few years, so it's happened a few times quite recently. Not necessarily people on the outside who want to take advantage, but that has happened, where I've learned to not go into a panic in the moment and forget about my own well-being and say, yes, okay, to this person, yes, I'll do that for you, even if it's bad for my own well-being, even if it's something that puts me into a situation where I'm kind of unsafe. What I've learned now is to, in the moment, step back in my mind and say, well, I'll have a think about that. Or I'll say immediately, now that I'm stronger, that doesn't sound right for my well-being. So I'm sorry, the answer's no. So I think it's just being aware, whether the autistic individual is a child or an adult, simply being aware of having the power to say no. And understanding also, not only can you say no, your well-being comes first. Your well-being comes first. So that's definitely something to have a think about, because thinking back 20, 30 years, it wasn't even in my head, strangely, that I should be putting my well-being first. It was like my mind had got into some strange habit where it was like I had to do as I was told. I had to follow instructions, even if that person telling me to follow particular instructions was bad for my well-being. Good for their well-being, but bad for mine. So it's that awareness. And if the individual can tune into that, then they will form a much better relationship with themselves, won't they?